The cabin was already a pile of splinters when I pulled up the gravel road at 6:37 on a Friday evening in early July. Karen Mitchell was standing on what used to be my front porch in a bright hot pink blazer suit with a gold necklace and a homemade HOA enforcement patch clipped crook to her clipboard, and she was waving an orange notice at me before I'd even shut the truck door. "If you didn't want this," she called out loud enough for the demolition crew to hear, "you should have paid your dues like everyone else." She slapped the orange notice flat against the splintered remains of my front door. Notice of pending lien final. The same color paper she'd been taping to my cabin every weekend for 6 months. "And the cleanup is being billed to your account. You'll have until Monday to settle, or we file foreclosure." I stopped walking. The cabin my father built in 1979 was lying behind her in a flat brown rectangle of broken cedar and snapped roof beams. The stone chimney was on its side in 2 clean pieces. My mother's hand-painted sign, "The Cabin," in faded blue, was face down in the dirt where somebody had stepped on it. Karen lifted her chin. 68 years old. 2-term HOA president. Retired school teacher. And the most dangerous woman in 3 counties because she had spent her entire adult life never once being told no. I almost smiled. She had no idea the quiet man she just threatened with foreclosure came from a family that put people like her in handcuffs for a living. And she had no idea what she had just put in writing. That was the moment I stopped being a son grieving a cabin and started being what my family does for a living. I didn't say anything. I walked past her. Glenn Tucker and Diane Whitcomb, the 2 board members hovering behind her, took small half steps back as I came up the gravel. They had the look of people who had agreed to something at a meeting without quite reading the page they signed. The demolition foreman was loading the last of my front door into a roll-off dumpster. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a sunburned neck and the wary eyes of someone whose career had been built on not asking too many questions. He saw me coming and stopped what he was doing. I walked past him too. I stopped at what was left of the foundation slab. There was a brass latch in the dirt by my left boot. I knew it before I bent down. The latch from our mailbox cast by my father in 1979 from a piece of brass he'd brought back from Vietnam, polished every spring of my childhood. The mailbox post had been knocked sideways by the back, and the latch had popped off and rolled into the gravel. I picked it up, wiped it on my jeans, put it in my left pocket. Then I saw the envelope. It was sticking out of the wreckage of the mailbox itself, half buried under a chunk of cedar siding, white. Government weight. The return address was printed in dark blue ink in the upper left corner. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Savannah District, Real Estate Division. I picked it up. I did not open it. I slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket against my chest and zipped the jacket closed. Karen was still talking. "Voted properly at the May meeting, which you would know if you ever attended. And the bylaws give the board full authority over delinquent properties. Section 4.7. You can read it for yourself. We had every right. Frankly, you should be thanking us." Section 4.7 of the Lakeview Estates bylaws is about exterior paint colors. I had read it twice. I turned around. Her clipboard was held against her chest. The top sheet was half flapping in the breeze. I could see the letterhead from where I stood. Notice of demolition. Authorized by HOA Board. Her signature was on the bottom in dark blue ballpoint. I clocked it without staring. Then I looked past her. Mr. Larson, my next-door neighbor for 12 years, was standing inside his front window with his phone held up against the glass. The little red dot was on. He had been filming the entire time. His hand was shaking, but the phone wasn't. He had braced it against the window frame. He looked at me through the glass. He didn't wave. He just gave me one small, deliberate nod. I gave him one back. I walked over to the demolition foreman. He was already watching me. I stopped in front of him and kept my voice low. "You signed the work order." His eyes flicked sideways to Karen. "Just once. Then back to me." "Ma'am over there," he said. "She had paperwork, said it was approved. Did you check her paperwork against the property records?" He didn't answer. "Did you pull a county demolition permit?" He didn't answer that either. He looked at his boots. I nodded. I said, "I'd hold on to a copy of whatever she gave you." "I'd hold on to it tonight." I turned and walked back toward the slab. Karen had been watching the exchange. I could tell from her face she didn't know what we'd said, and that not knowing was making her angry. She tapped her clipboard hard with her pen. The sound was sharp in the quiet. "I'm not finished with you," she said. "There are still outstanding fees. And the cleanup of this site is going to be billed to your account. You've had 37 months to take responsibility, and instead, you've been the worst kind of homeowner, absentee, dismissive, and frankly disrespectful. We've documented all of it. The board has been more than patient." I stood on the slab. I looked down at the dust on my boots. 37 months of HOA dues had come out of my checking account on the 3rd of every month by automatic bank transfer. Never late. Never short. I had the statements. I had emailed them to her in March and April and in May. She had told me in writing that the system says what the system says. I let her finish. When she was done, I looked up at her and I said, "You should go home, Mrs. Mitchell." That was all I said. She blinked. It was not the response she had rehearsed. She had rehearsed a screaming match, a public meltdown, something she could put in next month's newsletter as further proof of my unfit character. She had not rehearsed quiet. "Excuse me," she said. "Go home," I said again. "Take your clipboard. Take your board members. Take whatever copy of the work order you handed this man and put it somewhere you'll remember. You're going to need it." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Glenn Tucker behind her took another half step backward, the way a man does when he begins to suspect he's standing too close to something that's about to fall over. I turned my back on her and walked to my truck. I sat in the cab for a long time with the brass latch in my left pocket and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers envelope unopened against my chest and Mr. Larson's red recording light still on in the window of the house next door. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone, not yet. I thought about my father who had built that cabin with his own hands in the year I was born between his 14th and 15th years at the Bureau. I thought about my mother who painted that sign the summer I turned 6. I thought about Corinne Mitchell, 68 years old, two-term HOA president who had spent the last 3 years sending me orange notices for fees I had already paid and who had, that afternoon, escalated her hobby into a federal crime without realizing she had done it. I started the truck. I put it in reverse. I backed slowly down my own gravel road past the dumpster in the dust and the woman in the bright hot pink blazer suit, still standing where my porch used to be, and I drove until I was a mile down the highway and the cabin was out of sight. Then I pulled over, took out my phone, and I made the call I had been preparing for in some quiet part of myself for the entire 2-hour drive from Atlanta. She had no idea the quiet man standing in the dust of his own cabin came from a family that put people like her in handcuffs for a living. She had no idea what was in the envelope I just slipped into my jacket, and she had no idea, none at all, that she had just spent her last summer Friday as a free woman. To understand how a 68-year-old retired school teacher with a clipboard ended up demolishing a federally adjacent property on a Friday evening in early July, you have to go back 3 years to the gray morning in March when we buried my grandfather in the Veterans Cemetery outside Atlanta, and my father handed me the deed to the cabin in a manila envelope, with my name written across the front in my father's careful block letters. My father had been a special agent with the FBI for 40 years. He retired in 2008 with 2 commendations, a bad knee, and a love for a stretch of shoreline on Lake Hartwell that he discovered on a fishing trip in 1978. He built the cabin himself weekend by weekend between his 14th and 15th years at the Bureau. The cabin was the part of his life that had nothing to do with his work, and he made sure it stayed that way. When he died, the cabin came to me. I lived in a quiet condo near the federal building downtown during the week. The cabin was where I went on Fridays. That's all anyone in Lakeview Estates needed to know about me, and it was all I told them. I worked downtown, I'd say at the community mailboxes, vague enough that people could fill in whatever they wanted. People in my office have a particular way of treating paperwork. I let them take that however they took it. The Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association had existed since 1981, mostly as a 4-page bylaw document and an annual cookout. Then Corinne Mitchell ran for president on a platform of restoring standards and ran unopposed because nobody else wanted the job. That was the year the orange notices started. The first one was for the color of my screen door. The bylaws, Corinne said, required the approved earth tone palette. My screen door was the same forest green door my father had hung in 1979. The fine was $90. I paid it. The second was for my dock. Karen claimed it required an annual private dock fee of $325 payable in cash to the HOA treasurer, who happened to be Karen Mitchell. I asked to see the bylaw. She sent me Section 6.2. Section 6.2 said nothing about a dock fee. She wrote back that the fee had been adopted at a special board meeting. I asked for the minutes. She did not respond. I paid the $325. I noted it. I noted a great many things that first year. I noticed that Mr. Larson next door, a retired postal carrier who grew tomatoes in raised beds, had received 49 separate violation notices in 12 months for unapproved agricultural installations. I noticed that the Adasanas, who had bought the house at the end of the road, had been fined $425 for the wrong shade of black on their mailbox. I noticed that Mrs. Holloway, a widow on a fixed income, had been threatened with foreclosure over $1,260 in late fees she swore she had paid. Mrs. Holloway sold her house 6 months later to a real estate company that I would learn much later was registered to Karen's brother-in-law. By the second year, Karen had decided I was the project. I think she chose me because I was an absentee at the cabin only on weekends, and because I was quiet, and because quiet men are the easiest kind to mistake for weak men. She had watched me pay the screen door fine and the dock fee without argument, and she had read it as compliance. She had no idea that I was filing every notice in a manila folder marked Lakeview, and that the folder was sitting in my home office growing thicker by the week. The campaign started in January. Karen sent me a letter claiming my HOA dues for the previous quarter had not been received. The dues were paid by automatic bank transfer on the 3rd of every month, the same way they had been paid since I inherited the property. I sent her a screenshot of my bank statement. She replied in writing, "Our system does not show receipt. The system says what the system says." I sent the statement again, certified by my bank. She replied, "We have no record of a certified statement." I had the bank send confirmation directly to her email. She replied that the confirmation was not in the format the HOA accepts. That was the moment I understood what was actually happening. Karen was not confused about my dues. Karen was building a paper trail. She needed me delinquent on the page, so the page would eventually justify something larger. The remedy is always the point. The deficiency is the costume. I started saving everything, every email, every letter, every orange notice. I photographed each one the day it appeared on my door. Emailed the photos to myself with timestamps. Kept the originals in a fireproof box in my Atlanta condo. I also started reading the bylaws. The actual bylaws covered to cover with a yellow legal pad. By Sunday evening, I had 4 pages of notes on every place Karen had quoted them wrong. Section 4.7 was about paint. Section 6.2 said nothing about docks. Section 9.1, which she'd cited in 3 separate threat letters, gave the board advisory authority over common areas only, not over private lots, not over private homes. The HOA, by its own bylaws, owned exactly 2 things in Lakeview Estates: the gravel access road and a 50-ft strip of common shoreline near the boat ramp. It did not own my cabin. It did not own my dock. It did not own my mailbox. In April, Mr. Larson came over while I was changing a porch light. He didn't say much. He told me he had a binder. He said when I was ready, he'd show me. I told him I was getting ready. I had not told my family any of it. My mother lived in Asheville and had enough on her plate. My older brother was a deputy U.S. Marshal in Birmingham. My younger sister was an assistant United States attorney in the Northern District of Georgia. I did not call them. I wanted to handle it myself. That was vanity, I know. I told myself it was discretion. It was vanity. In May, 3 weeks before the demolition, Karen left a voicemail on my phone at 11:40 on a Tuesday night. Her voice was calm in the recording, calm and pleased with itself. "Final warning," she said. "Pay or face consequences. We will resolve this." I deleted it from my phone the next morning. I did not know yet that my carrier auto-archived voicemails to the cloud for 90 days. Karen did not know that either. I went up to the cabin that Friday, the way I always did. I made coffee on the stove. I sat on the porch in the green Adirondack chair my father had built, and I watched the sun go down over Lake Hartwell, And I thought about the difference between a woman who has been told no enough times in her life and a woman who has not. Karen Mitchell, I was beginning to understand, had not, that, more than anything else, was what she was about to find out. The Friday Karen made it personal was the second Friday in April, 2 months before the demolition. There were 3 of them in my driveway when I pulled up. Karen in her bright hot pink blazer suit, Tom Reeves holding a tape measure, and Diane Whitcomb with a matching clipboard. Tom had the end of the tape pressed against the corner of my deck. Diane was writing something down. They were measuring my deck. Without permission, I pulled the truck up slow, killed the engine, and sat there for a beat with my hands on the wheel. It gives me a second to file my face before I get out. Evening, I said. Karen turned with the air of a woman interrupted in her important work. We're documenting non-compliant structures. The deck extends 2 ft past the original footprint. Past whose footprint? The one on file with the HOA. The one you keep in your house. She didn't answer that. I walked across the gravel. Tom Reeves let the tape measure retract with a soft snap and stepped back from the deck without meeting my eyes. Diane kept writing. I stopped about 6 ft away. I took my phone out of my jacket pocket, tapped the record icon in plain sight, and held the phone up at chest level. Georgia is a one-party consent state. I did not need her permission, and I did not want her permission. I wanted her to see me doing it. You're recording me, I am. That's not legal, it is. Please continue. She glanced at Tom. Tom had developed a sudden interest in his shoes. She turned back to me, and I watched her decide in real time that the recording was an opportunity. She squared her shoulders. She wanted me on tape. She wanted to perform. Section 4.7 of the bylaws, she said clearly, gives the board authority over delinquent properties. Your property is delinquent. Your dues have not been received in good standing for over a year. The board has discussed enforcement options. Section 4.7 of the Lakeview Estates bylaws is about exterior paint colors. I knew exactly which section she meant to be quoting, and I knew she did not actually know which section she meant to be quoting either, which is a different and more dangerous kind of wrong, and frankly, she continued, the board is running out of patience. We have ways of resolving deadbeat properties. We have discussed it. You don't want to be the example we make. Tom's shoes had become extremely interesting. What ways? I asked, excuse me. You said the board has ways of resolving deadbeat properties. Which ways? She blinked. The performance had not anticipated a follow-up question. That would be a board matter. Confidential. I'm a member of the association. Georgia's Property Owners Association Act says you have to share association records with members within 15 business days of a written request. I said it flat, the way you'd read a recipe out loud. One sentence. The state requires HOAs to share records with members. It means Karen could not legally hide what her board was deciding. I let it sit. Karen's chin came down half an inch. That's a misreading of the statute, it isn't. You're not a lawyer. I didn't say I was. I took a folded printout from my inside jacket pocket. 3 years of bank auto pay records certified by the bank that morning. I held it out. She looked at it like I was offering her a snake. Bank records can be falsified, she said. She said it loud for the recording. She really did. I'd been waiting 2 years to hear her say something that clean. This is a certified statement from a federally regulated bank. Are you stating on this recording that my bank has falsified federal records on my behalf? I'm stating that we have our own system. Your system shows what? It shows what it shows. I let the printout drop into the dirt at her feet. The breeze caught the top edge and folded it back. She watched it fold and did not move. Tom Reeves behind her made a sound, not a word. Just a small breath of someone who had seen something he could no longer pretend he hadn't seen. He glanced at me for half a second. I clocked it. He looked away. I'd like a copy of the board meeting minutes, I said, where the discussion of enforcement options against my property took place. Within the 15 business days the statute provides. We don't owe you that, you do. I'll have to consult our HOA attorney, please do. Her face hardened. I had seen that hardening before on the faces of people who had just realized the conversation they thought they were having was not the conversation that was actually happening. She did not back down. People like Karen do not back down at the moment they realize they should. They double. Let me be very clear. The board has options. We can fine. We can lien. We can pursue legal remedies that go far beyond what you seem to think is possible. We have ways of resolving deadbeat properties. You do not want to be the example we make. She had said it twice now, on tape twice. I thanked her for her time. I picked the printout up out of the dirt. It was mine. Walked back to my truck and emailed the recording to myself with a timestamp before I'd even pulled out of the driveway. I drove back to Atlanta that Sunday. I thought about Tom Reeves's small breath and Diane Whitcomb's blank face and the way the printout had fluttered in the dirt at Corinne's feet. I thought about a woman so used to being the only voice in a room that she had not yet developed an ear for what a recording sounds like when it is being made against her. I did not call my brother. I did not call my sister. I told myself I was waiting. The truth was, I wanted to see how far Corinne would go on her own. I drove back to Atlanta with her words on my recorder, not knowing she was already on the phone with a demolition company before my truck reached the highway. I drove up that Saturday morning with a thermos of coffee and a folder under my arm, and I knocked on Mr. Larson's front door for the first time in 12 years. He opened it before my second knock. He looked at me through the screen, took in the folder and said, "I was hoping it'd be you." His kitchen smelled like fresh bread and old paper. There was a binder on the table, 3 in thick black, the kind a man buys when he is going to take something seriously. He'd already set out 2 mugs. "Sit down," he said. "I've been waiting 4 years. I wasn't sure who'd come asking." "I'm glad it was you." He opened the binder. The first page was an index hand-typed, printed on his home printer, dated the week Corinne Mitchell was sworn in as HOA president. Tabs underneath, Holloway Adasina Patel Caruso Larson. Each section had its own table of contents. Each entry had a date, a violation number, a photograph, and where Mr. Larson had been able to obtain one, a copy of the underlying paperwork. 49 violations against him personally, 8 foreclosure threats against Mrs. Holloway over fees she'd already paid, 13 cash private dock fees paid by the Patels, none of which appeared in any bylaw. The Adasina's $425 mailbox fine with photographs of 3 other mailboxes on the same street, painted the same shade of black, none of them cited. "There's a pattern," he said. "I imagine you've already seen it." I had. "She picks the ones who travel or who are old or who don't speak English at home. She manufactures a fee dispute. She wears them down. Some of them sell. The ones who sell, 2 of them that I know of, sold to a real estate company called Lakeshore Holdings, which, if you pull the registration in Hall County, is owned by her brother-in-law Raymond. Same P.O. box the HOA uses for dues." He turned to a page near the back. The Hall County business registration was already there with the P.O. box circled in red. "I'd like to make copies," I said. "Take it home. I have a backup in my safe." I drove that afternoon to Mrs. Patel's house, 2 doors down from mine. She answered the door with a dish towel in her hand and a wariness. I recognized the wariness of a woman who has answered too many doors to too many HOA visits in 2 years. I told her I wasn't from the HOA. I told her Mr. Larson had sent me. "Come in," she said. "I have something I've been keeping." She had recordings. 6 of them on her phone made over 18 months of Corinne Mitchell standing in the same kitchen demanding $325 in cash for a private dock fee. Mrs. Patel had paid it twice. The 3rd time she had begun to record. She played one for me. "The fee is the fee, Mrs. Patel. The board has voted. We don't take checks for this one, cash only by Friday." I asked if she'd be willing to share the recordings. "I have been waiting," she said, "for someone to ask." I visited the Adasinas after that. They had kept every notice and every email in a single neat box. I left their kitchen at 5:00 with copies of everything on a thumb drive in my pocket. Tom Reeves called me at 6:15. I had not given Tom Reeves my number. He had it because he was on the HOA roster and because Corinne, of course, had never thought to consider what would happen if a board member ever decided to use the roster for himself. Waffle House on 985 tomorrow morning 6:15. "I have things to give you." I met him in a back booth at 6:05 Sunday morning. He was already there, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, looking like a man who had not slept. He pushed a manila envelope across the table. "Board minutes," he said. "All 12 months. The real ones, not what she submits." I opened it. Photocopies of meeting minutes kept by the secretary Tom, in his own hand. 3 of the months Corinne had reported as having votes on enforcement actions against my property had no votes at all. 1 of them had no quorum. One of them had no meeting. The minutes Karen had circulated as official were on the page in front of me. Pure invention. Why now? I asked him. He looked at the table. My wife has cancer. We can't sell this house and start over. If she finds a way to do to us what she did to Mrs. Holloway, we are done. I've been a coward for 2 years. I'd like to stop. I told him I'd take care of it. I drove back up to my cabin at noon. I walked the property line. I photographed every wall, every beam, every window of the cabin my father had built in 1979. Wide shots, close-ups, the dock, the foundation, the chimney, the brass mailbox latch, the screen door, my mother's hand-painted sign. I notarized them with a digital timestamp service. I uploaded everything to a secure share that night. Then I called my sister. Hey, Maya's, hey, everything okay? I have a binder I'd like you to look at when you have time. She paused. My sister has known me long enough to read my voice through a phone line. How thick is the binder? 3 in plus a thumb drive of audio plus a stack of forged board minutes. Is this a Lake Hartwell thing? It is. How long have you been sitting on this? A while. Send it tonight. I sent it that night. I sat on the porch in my father's green Adirondack chair after the upload finished. The lake went black. The frog started up. I had no idea that while I was sitting there, the demolition contract had already been signed in a yard outside Gainesville, and the backhoe was already on a flatbed, scheduled for the 3rd Friday in June. The call came at 3:42 on a Friday afternoon in the 3rd week of June. I was at my desk on the 8th floor of the Federal Building in downtown Atlanta. My phone buzzed. Mr. Larson's name on the screen. He had never called me before in his life. There's a backhoe at your place, he said. Karen's here. They're tearing it down. I closed what I was working on. I stood up. I did not say anything for about 2 seconds. What do I do? He said. Film everything from your front window. Don't engage. Don't call the sheriff. I'll be there in 2 hours. You sure about the sheriff? I'm sure. Just film. I hung up. I walked out of the office at 3:48. I told my supervisor I had a personal emergency. She looked at my face and did not ask a follow-up question. I took the stairs. I drove out of the parking deck at 3:53. I did not speed. You do not arrive at a scene angry. You arrive clean and you process what is in front of you and you let other people make the mistakes. I called my father from the truck at 4:18. I told him what was happening. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, take pictures of everything when you get there. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. I'm going to make some calls. That was all he said. I knew what it meant. I stopped once at a Shell station outside Athens at 4:49. I went inside, bought a black coffee I did not drink, and sat in the cab pulling up a cloud folder I had not opened in 2 years. Cabin Estate. I tapped the document on top. It was a federal lease. United States Army Corps of Engineers, Savannah District. Shoreline Use Lease Lot, B. Lake Hartwell Reservoir. Issued 1981 to my father. Renewed in my name in 2021. The cabin my father had built in 1979 sat on a 50 ft strip of shoreline that did not belong to him. It belonged to the federal government. The lease specified, in plain language on page 3, that no structure on the leased premises could be modified, removed, or demolished without written federal authorization. Under 18 U.S. Code Section 1361, the willful destruction of property of the United States is a federal offense. Karen Mitchell did not know any of that. I had known for 2 years. I had not raised it once. The lease was a card I had kept in my pocket through every orange notice, every fee dispute, every threat. The card was now on the table because Karen had put it there, not me. I printed the lease at the gas station's customer service printer for $2.40. I slid it into my jacket pocket. I drove the last 40 miles to the cabin. You already know what I found when I got there. What I have not told you is what was happening in the 22 minutes before I arrived. Mr. Larson had filmed all of it from his living room window with his phone braced against the frame. The camera did not shake. The audio was clean. The whole 22 minutes is now a federal exhibit. In the first minute, Karen is on my porch with her clipboard directing the foreman. Start with the south wall. We want it down before he gets here. 3 minutes in. She is on her own phone on speaker talking to someone she calls Raymond Mitchell, her brother-in-law. It's done by tonight. The eyesore is gone. We did it within our rights. Have the listing ready by Monday, 8 minutes in. The foreman tells her he has not pulled a county demolition permit. He is not comfortable proceeding without one. Karen tells him, don't worry about a stop work order. The HOA has authority here. I have it in writing. Just keep going. 11 minutes in. She narrates the destruction of my mother's hand-painted sign as it falls into the dirt. That sign has been an eyesore for years. I always hated it. 19 minutes in. The chimney comes down. The stones fall in 2 clean pieces. 22 minutes in. Karen turns to the foreman and says, if he didn't want this, he should have paid his dues like everyone else. That is the line that became the title of every legal motion my sister filed in the 8 months after. I arrived at 6:37. You know what I did? I picked up the brass latch. I pocketed the federal envelope from the mailbox. I told Karen to go home. I drove a mile down the road and I called my father. What I did not describe before is what happened after Karen and the demolition crew left. I drove back to the cabin at 7:12. The site was empty. The dumpster was gone. The dust was still settling. The light was still pink over the lake, the way the light at Lake Hartwell sometimes is on a June evening. Mr. Larson came across the property line carrying a small brown paper bag. He handed it to me without speaking. Inside was a thumb drive. 22 minutes, he said. From the moment they pulled in, I haven't watched it back. I didn't want to. I took the bag. I put it in my pocket. I've been waiting 4 years, he said, to give somebody this. I sat down on the foundation slab. My legs had decided they were going to give out, and I would rather they give out somewhere I'd chosen. Mr. Larson sat down with me in the dust. He did not say anything else for a long time. I opened the federal envelope after he left. It was a routine renewal notice for the lease. 3 weeks old. It did not matter. The original lease was already in my jacket. The case was no longer mine. The case was the United States of America's. I pulled out my phone. I called my father back. Dad. She demolished it. A long pause. I could hear him breathing. 40 years at the Bureau. He had told me when I joined that the only mistake the bad ones ever really make is doing the thing in front of someone who knows what it is. He said 4 words. Bring the whole family. I said I will. I hung up. I sat on the slab in the last light over the lake. I thought about my brother in Birmingham and my sister in Atlanta, who already had 3 in of binder and a thumb drive of recordings on her desk. And I thought about Karen Mitchell, 68 years old, 2-term HOA president, who had spent the afternoon directing the destruction of property of the United States while a postal carrier next door filmed every second. The monthly HOA meeting was held in the community center off the main road. Karen had put the demolition on the agenda as property compliance update. Second item between the landscaping budget and the boat ramp gate. I arrived 20 minutes early. I sat in the front row with a single manila folder on my lap. Inside the folder was 1 sheet of paper, and that was the only thing I needed. The hall filled in a way it had not filled in 2 years. Mr. Larson took the seat next to me. Mrs. Patel came in with her husband. The Adasanas came in. Tom Reeves came in last and sat in the back with his hands folded on his knees. By the Karen brought down the gavel. Every chair was occupied and 12 people were standing along the back wall. 3 of them I had not seen come in. A tall older man stood by the coffee urn gray suit, no tie. A woman in her 30s beside him, dark blazer. A younger man in a navy suit at the corner of the back row. None of them sat down. None of them introduced themselves. Karen, scanning the room from the table at the front, looked right past them. She called the meeting to order. She did the landscaping budget in 4 minutes. Then she folded her hands and looked for a long, satisfied moment at me. Item 2. Property compliance update. As most of you are aware, the board has been dealing with a chronic delinquent property at Lot 47. After 37 months of unpaid dues, the board took decisive action 2 weeks ago to remove the non-compliant structure. The result is a cleaner, safer Lakeview Estates. A few sparse claps. Most of the room was silent. 3 phones came up over 3 shoulders along the back wall, red recording dots on. Karen did not see them. We have invited the property owner here tonight to explain himself to the extent that he can. She gestured at me. I stood up. I turned to face the room. Before I say anything, I'd like the 3 people standing at the back to step forward. Karen frowned. The room turned. The 3 strangers stepped forward 2 paces. The fluorescent lights caught the older man's gray suit. The room got quiet in a particular way, not the quiet of a captive audience, but the quiet of a room that has just realized it does not understand what it is in. This is my father. This is my older brother. This is my younger sister. They wanted to be here tonight. I'll explain why in a moment. I sat back down. Karen's mouth opened again. She did not recognize them. She fell back on the script. Well, this is a community matter, not a family matter. The board has documented over $15,120 in unpaid dues. We have certified copies of demand letters and minutes of the meetings where enforcement was voted on. The action we took was authorized, documented, and within our rights. She set down the printout. She looked at me. She was confident. I stood up again. I walked to the front. I stopped in front of her table, opened the manila folder, and took out one sheet of paper. I set it down facing her. It was a letter. United States Army Corps of Engineers, Savannah District, dated 3 days earlier. 2 paragraphs on official letterhead. The first confirmed that the cabin at Lot 47 had stood on federally leased shoreline Lot 47B under a continuous lease since 1981, currently held by me. The second confirmed that the demolition of any structure on a federally leased shoreline parcel without written federal authorization constituted a violation of 18 U.S. Code Section 1361, and that the matter had been referred for federal investigation. Karen read it. The first paragraph took her about 4 seconds. The second took longer. Her eyes went back to the top, and she read the whole thing again. And then her hand, the right one, went up to her throat and stayed there. The room did not know what was on the page. The room knew only that Karen Mitchell, 2-term HOA president, was looking at a piece of paper with her hand at her throat and her face going the color of paper itself. This is some kind of forgery. We will address this through our attorney. This meeting is adjourned. She reached for the gavel. The tall older man at the back wall stepped forward another pace. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, you'll want to stay seated. The tall older man walked to the front of the room. He did not hurry. He walked the way a man walks who has walked into a great many rooms in his life and has never once been the one who needed to hurry. He stopped at the corner of Karen's folding table. He reached into his inside breast pocket and took out a leather wallet. He flipped it open. A gold shield, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Senior Special Agent retired. My name is Robert, he said. He was still speaking to the room as much as to Karen. I retired from the Bureau in 2008 after 40 years. I'm here tonight as a material witness. The cabin you demolished sat on a federal shoreline lease. What you destroyed was federal property. That makes this a federal matter, not a homeowner's matter. Karen's mouth was open. No sound was coming out. The older brother stepped forward from the back of the room. He walked the length of the center aisle. Every head in the room tracked him. He stopped beside our father at the table. He opened his own wallet. A silver star inside a circle. United States Marshal Service. Deputy United States Marshal, he said. He set a folded paper down on the table next to the Army Corps letter. This is a federal arrest warrant signed this afternoon by a magistrate judge for the Northern District of Georgia. The charges are destruction of government property under 18 U.S. Code Section 1361, mail fraud for the lien notices you sent through the United States mail under false pretenses, 8 of them over 36 months, and conspiracy to commit fraud against the homeowners of this association. Mail fraud is a federal crime when someone uses the postal system to send false documents demanding money. Karen's orange notices sent through the mail demanding fees that had already been paid fit the statute exactly. The room did not move. My sister stepped forward. She walked up the same aisle. She did not open a wallet. She placed a thin business card on the table face up in front of Karen. The card read Maya, Assistant United States Attorney, Northern District of Georgia. I'm prosecuting the federal case, she said. Her voice was quiet and clear. A civil action against the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association will be filed Monday morning for federal property destruction. Personal liability is on the table for every board member who voted yes on the demolition, and for every board member who failed to vote at all because the vote never happened. She turned slightly toward the back row. Mr. Reeves has been cooperating with my office for 11 days. The board minutes you have been circulating are forgeries. He has the originals. We have the originals. Tom Reeves did not stand up. He just nodded once from the back row, with his hands still folded on his knees. I stood up from the front row. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I took out a credentials wallet I had not opened in front of another civilian in 14 years. I flipped it open and held it out so the row in front of me could see, and so the row behind me could see, and so Karen could see. A gold shield. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent, Atlanta Field Office. I work white-collar crimes, I said. I've spent 6 months building this file at home on weekends. Everything you said and signed is in it. Karen made a sound. It was not a word. Mrs. Patel covered her mouth. Mr. Larson beside me allowed himself one small smile and then let it go. A woman 3 rows back said, "Oh my God," in a voice that was meant for herself and got out anyway. A board member behind Karen, Diane Whitcomb, slid her chair backwards 6 in a single motion, the legs scraping against the floor, putting visible distance between her body and Karen's. Karen tried to speak. Her voice cracked. My attorney. Your attorney has already been notified, my brother said. You'll be processed at the Hart County Federal Courthouse tonight. Pre-trial detention will be requested due to evidence destruction concerns. You texted the demolition form in this morning at 9:14 asking him to delete his copy of the contract. He forwarded the text to my office at 9:22. Karen's eyes went to her phone on the table. She did not pick it up. Her face confirmed the text was real. The projector at the back of the room. Mr. Larson had quietly set it up an hour before the meeting clicked on. The white screen behind the board's table filled with grainy video. A HOA driveway. A woman in a bright hot pink blazer suit. Karen's voice came out of the speaker, 22 minutes long, in front of 97 people. Start with the south wall. We want it down before he gets here. A breath went through the room. Don't worry about a stop work order. The HOA has authority here. Karen sat down without meaning to. Her hand was still at her throat. That sign has been an eyesore for years. I always hated it. Mrs. Adasina, 3 rows back, made a small sound and turned her face away. The video reached the 22nd minute. Karen's recorded voice came out of the speaker and into the air of the room she had ruled for 2 years. If he didn't want this, he should have paid his dues like everyone else. The room heard the line 3 times. Once on tape, once in their memory of the demolition itself, 2 weeks earlier, and once as Karen, sitting at the table, mounted silently along with herself broken, watching her own face on the screen. The video stopped. The lights came back up. Nobody clapped. That is not what this was. I stayed where I was, standing in the front row, credentials still open in my hand. My father stood at the corner of the table. My brother stood beside him with the warrant. My sister stood with her business card on the wood. Karen sat in front of all of it. I said one thing, quietly and only to her. I gave you 3 years of bank records. You said the system says what the system says. The system says what it says now. The remaining board called an emergency vote at 7:41. The motion was to remove Karen Mitchell as president of the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association effective immediately. The vote was 6-1. Tom Reeves abstained. He was already a cooperating witness, and his abstention was on the record. My brother walked around the table. He produced handcuffs from his belt. He read Karen her rights at the same folding card table where she had brought down her own gavel 5 weeks earlier. He cuffed her in front of 97 people. He walked her out the front door of the community center she had run like a fiefdom for 2 years. Mr. Larson stood up. He clapped once, twice alone for 2 full seconds. Then the entire room joined him. Karen Mitchell pleaded guilty 9 months later in federal district court in Atlanta. The charges were destruction of government property, mail fraud, and conspiracy. The sentence was 4 years in federal prison plus full restitution. The Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association was dissolved by court order pending forensic audit. 2 former board members were charged for forgery. Tom Reeves received cooperator immunity and kept his house. My sister's office opened a broader investigation into Lakeshore Holdings, LLC, and Karen's brother-in-law was indicted 6 months after that. The federal court awarded full reconstruction cost of the cap, $352,000 plus damages, plus the 3 years of HOA fees Karen had used as her pretext, $15,120. The same number Karen had named in front of 97 people 2 weeks before she was let out of the community center in handcuffs. The check came on heavy government paper with a Treasury Department watermark. I framed the stub. Mr. Larson, Mrs. Patel, the Adesnas, and 12 other previously fined homeowners received restitution from frozen association accounts. Mrs. Holloway's estate got its house back from Lakeshore Holdings. So did one other family. Karen's personal assets were seized to cover the judgment. The HOA was replaced with a voluntary Lake Road Association. Mr. Larson was elected secretary unanimously. The annual 4th of July cookout returned after a 10-year absence. A small wooden sign appeared at the entrance to the community center. Volunteers welcome, badges optional. The neighborhood got the joke. I let them have it. I rebuilt the cabin with my father. We started in October, the week the federal injunction was lifted, and we worked weekends through the winter and into the spring. Same footprint, same orientation toward the lake. Same forest green screen door hung in the same spot it had hung since 1979. My father was 71. He moved slower than he had at 60, and he stopped to rest more often than he liked, but he laid every floor joist himself. He said his hands remembered the work. The brass mailbox, latched the one I had picked up out of the dust on the Friday Karen demolished the cabin. I cleaned with a soft cloth and a little oil, and I reinstalled it on the new mailbox the morning we hung the front door. The morning we finished the deck, my father handed me a hammer he had bought in 1979. He said, "Your grandfather would be proud. I did not check my work email that week. I did not check it the week after. It was the first time in 15 years I had let a Monday go by without looking. I drove up the gravel road on a Friday evening in early July, 2 years after the demolition, to spend a long weekend at the lake. The new cabin stood where the old one had stood. The chimney was rebuilt in the same stone. My mother's hand-painted sign the cabin, in faded blue, repaired and resealed, hung above the door where she had hung it the summer I turned 6. The brass latch caught the late sun. The Army Corps of Engineers leased the document that had ended the case before my sister had needed to argue it sat, framed above the fireplace between 2 photographs of my father, Mr. Larson waved from his porch as I pulled up. I waved back. The sun went down over Lake Hartwell the way it goes down some June evenings when the air is thick with summer and the water turns the color of a coin. I sat on the porch in my father's green Adirondack chair. I drank a beer. I did not think about Karen Mitchell. I had not thought about her in months. She demolished a cabin. She didn't know that cabin had a foundation she couldn't see. None of them ever do.